afternoon, everybody. I'm the 100 Proof News Hound here with another episode of the 100 Years and More Show. Today we're going to take a look at the man who ushered in the modern world. He was the transitional political figure between the smoke-filled rooms of the 19th century and the progressive reformers of the 20th century. Of course, I'm talking about Theodore Teddy Roosevelt, the progressive Republican. Chew on that phrase for a second. He was not a populist. He was a progressive reforming Republican. It's a beast that doesn't exist anymore, but was one that was sorely needed in the late 19th and early 20th century. You know, Teddy loved to tell people what to do, but they were always with the best of intentions. He was the kind of guy that if he wanted your opinion, he wouldn't ask for it. He would basically tell you what your opinion should be, but he would do it in the most forceful yet polite way possible. We're going to take Theodore from a young lad even all the way through to the edge of the White House. We're going to cover the 25-year period just before he becomes president. The reason we're actually going to divide this into two segments. There's going to be this episode, then a later episode, because his life, a lot like Winston Churchill, well, they did enough for 10 men. So we're going to combine lives 1 through 5 in this episode, and then do the second episode be lives 6 through 10. And even if you think you know everything there is to know about Teddy Roosevelt, you're going to learn something new from this episode, because we're coming at it from the perspective of how newspapers of the day treated Theodore Roosevelt, which is a slightly different perspective than you're going to get in the textbooks or PBS documentaries. So let's get started. Theodore Roosevelt's born in 1858 on East 20th Street in Manhattan. He's homeschooled, which was probably a good thing because he would have been incredibly annoying if he was in your class. Biographers like to say that he had a terrible case of asthma, and that led to him leading a strenuous outdoor life for health reasons. They also kind of downplay his background, family background of wealth and society. I'm here to expose that aspect of his life a little more, and let's do that right now. His family is the definition of old money. They talk about nouveau riche and old money. They're old money with like 5 O's, old money. The patriarch of the entire clan was one Klaus Martinez von Rosenfeld, and he comes to North America in 1640. But when he gets here, New York is not New York City, it's New Amsterdam. He's Dutch and he's in the Dutch colony. It wouldn't be for another 25 years before it became an English colony, by which point Roosevelt's firmly settled in the culture of the city. There's so many Roosevelts kicking around in the early 19th century that Teddy Roosevelt's clan are referred to as the Oyster Bay Roosevelts, and their ringleader was one Cornelius Van Schack Roosevelt. He's Teddy's grandfather. How did he make his money? Well, him and a couple of his buddies formed Chemical Bank in around 1820, and that Chemical Bank would stay in operation until 1868 when it was merged with Chase Bank. Teddy's father, Theodore Roosevelt Sr., made his money in plate glass, which was a new thing, all the rage in the early 1800s. He was actually part of the Plate Glass Trust, the monopoly on plate glass in America. He also made money from the family bank, basically. It was Roosevelt and Son investment bankers, and they stayed in operation until the 1970s. How high up were they in society in New York City in the 1880s? Well, we know that the Astors and the Astor 400 names in the book that had to fit into her ballroom, those are the swells. Well, they're one of those swells. Let's have a look at what the Daily Graphic newspaper of January 14th, 1881 had to say. It says, the most brilliant society event of the season thus far was a ball given by Mrs. William Astor last evening at her residence at the corner of 5th Avenue and 34th Street. About 800 guests were present, double the 400. The German began at midnight. I had to look, what the heck does that mean? The German began at midnight. German was the dance craze. Instead of a waltz or whatever else, they referred to the whole dancing thing as doing the German. So it's one of those parties where the dancing starts at midnight, goes all night long, and they roll out 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. They make note of what the women were wearing, and Mrs. Astor wore a Worth dress of white satin embroidered with silver and low neck and full train, and with a profusion of diamonds. Sounds spectacular. But not to be outdone, 2 lines later, Mrs. Theodore Roosevelt's dress was white satin with elegant diamonds and pearls. And they note that the picture gallery at the rear of the house had been converted into a lovely ballroom for 800 guests. Now, the Roosevelts also threw their own parties, and we have one summarized here. And strangely enough, the Dallas Herald of December 19th, 1880. So the Roosevelts are known coast to coast. Here's what it says here. Mrs. Theodore Roosevelt of number 6 West 47th Street also gave a ball in honor of the recent marriage of her son, Mr. Theodore Roosevelt Jr., and Mrs. Alice Lee of Salem, Massachusetts. So they get married. He gets married in 1880. Then it goes into a detailed description of just who the Roosevelts are. Okay, here we go. The Roosevelts are an old family, you know. Indeed, I believe their ancestors ate Dutch herring, smoked long-stemmed pipes, and drank Holland gin. And consequently, they have grown up with the country, and in growing up, they have accumulated a vast deal of the world's goods. Sounds fairly prosperous. Well, I don't know of any people who make better use of their wealth. They live royally, entertain lavishly, are not purse proud, and spend thousands every year on charity. There is not a lady in New York who does more to relieve the suffering and distress and want for fellow beings than Mrs. Theodore Roosevelt. Well, they're swells, good-natured swells, and very generous swells. But doesn't mean you can't go through your life doing nothing. So Teddy's got to do something. And remember, he said very early in his life that he wanted to become a member of the ruling class. I didn't know there was a ruling class in America, but apparently Teddy thinks there is. And when you go through his story plus other politicians' stories from the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, you realize that, yeah, there is a ruling class and you just aren't in it. So anyways, what's the first thing he does? He runs for New York State Assemblyman. Here's the New York Tribune of November 10th, 1881. The vote for Assemblyman. The returns of the voting in this city for a member of the Assembly show that 5 Republicans have been elected. They list 4 guys you've never heard of, and then they say that Theodore Roosevelt has been elected in the 21st District. So Teddy's got his foot in the door. What's he going to do? Well, he's naturally a reformer. He's an instigator, reformer. He wants to move things along, and he will not stand for injustice. And you know what? The United States at that point in time could use a little bit of reforming. It may not be progressive reformers, may not be carrying the day at the present time, but back in the 1880s, 1890s, you had politics run by guys like Tammany Hall in New York City. You had business being run by monopolies and trusts. There were very few rules regulating any human behavior in either the political or the business world, and the world was in need of some reforming, and that's where Teddy steps in here. And he decides he's going to take on some of the most powerful people in America. He's going to take on Jay Gould and appeals judge Westbrook. And what have they done? Well, here's what the New York Times says they've done. It says here, on December 26, 1881, the New York Times began the publication of a series of exposures showing the rascally manner in which the Gould Field Sage clique had acquired the control of the elevated railways of this city. So these guys have somehow managed to take control of the elevated railways, which are the precursor of the subways. It says it was shown that the stock gamblers had enmeshed in their web the state's Attorney General, Hamilton Ward, and Supreme Court Judge Westbrook, and that many lawyers had aided its bringing about the success of one of the greatest scandals that ever afflicted the community. And Roosevelt's going to be the point man against this type of abuse. But it doesn't spend all his time fighting this kind of abuse, because just like Churchill, when he's got downtime, he writes books, real serious books. The first book he writes in 1882 at the age of 24 is Roosevelt's Naval War of 1812. It gets a favorable review here in the Independent New York of August 3rd, 1882. It says here, the national ear pricks with pride at any mention of the American War of 1812. It says here, in other words, the book aims to be an accurate, impartial history, which even an Englishman can take up and read through without feeling that it has been another acute case of American bombast. He's written a scientific, scholarly work examining all aspects of the naval wars of 1812, and it's very well received. Now, tragedy strikes. Even when things are going well, tragedy can come out of the blue. Didn't look like it was going to be that way. His wife Alice got pregnant in 1883, and she's ready to give birth in February of 1884, and she does. She gives birth to a lovely daughter. But as she's giving birth on that same day, they discover that she is suffering from Bright's disease, which is a serious kidney disorder. At the exact same time, Roosevelt's mother comes down with typhoid fever, which worsens over the course of 2 days. And then at the evening of the second day, both his wife and his mother die simultaneously. So that in 1 2-day period, Roosevelt he's a father, he's a widower, and he's an orphan, all within 2 days. That's even for a fatal optimist like Theodore Roosevelt, that's a lot. We have the article here from the New York Times, February 17th, 1884, with respect to the funeral. I thought it would be worth reading. Wife and mother buried together, the double funeral of Alice Hathaway Roosevelt and Martha Bulloch Roosevelt, who died suddenly at their homes on West 45th Street and West 57th Street was held in the Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church at 10 o'clock yesterday morning. The church was crowded with relatives and friends of the Roosevelt family. In front of the altar were 2 rosewood coffins covered with wreaths of roses, lilies, and green vines. And at the door, 2 hearses stood side by side. That's fairly depressing. So let's get undepressed. Because what does Roosevelt do to get over such tragedy? Well, he throws himself into politics, and he gets involved as a state's representative in the 1884 presidential election. He's part of a group of guys that are kind of like the Young Turks. They're young reformers, and they want change. And one of the first things they do is they try to get John R. Lynch elected to be the temporary chairman of the Republican National Convention. And why is that important, or why is that unique in 1884? Well, this gentleman's black. Here's what the Boston Globe had to say. The selection of John R. Lynch, the colored ex-congressman from Mississippi, as temporary chairman of the Republican National Convention is, of course, the sensation of the hour in political circles tonight. So he's broken in at the national level. He's done something important and something newsworthy. And at least the northern readers are finding it to be quite an interesting and progressive thing to do. But politics is a high-stakes game. You can be riding high today, and you can be riding low tomorrow. He continues on. The next day, he continues on with good press. This is from the New York Times. It says, up from the midst of the Empire State delegates rose a slight, almost boyish figure. It was that of an active, nervous, light-haired, gray-eyed man who had just thrown off a straw hat and scrambled to his perch in the chair with juvenile activity. It stood here scarce and influential delegate with whom he has not conversed in a straightforward, manly way, carrying conviction even when he could not convert. It was Theodore Roosevelt of New York. He's a positive, practical man. He's getting some tremendous press there. But here's the problem. He was trying to get everyone to vote for Edmunds, but James Blaine won. He backed the wrong horse. And not only did he back the wrong horse, but him and his friend Henry Cabot Lodge uttered a few utterances that hinted that maybe they would be leaving the Republican Party to go off and do a third party. That didn't fly well. Here we have, the Boston Herald wouldn't stand for it. No one can deny, says the Boston Herald, that the position taken by Mr. Roosevelt and Mr. Lodge towards the Republican nomination is logical and reasonable. As delegates to the National Convention, they did all they could to beat Blaine and failed. There's only one alternative for them. They must abide by the results or leave the party. And he doesn't know what to do. So he doesn't know what to do. So he's decided he's going to take some time off and refresh, because right now he's on the wrong side of the Republican Party. And so he does what anybody would do with unlimited resources in the 1880s. He goes west. And he goes west into Dakota Territory to become a gentleman rancher. And I say gentleman rancher because if the biographers would have you think that the Dakota Territories at that time were basically the same as they had been 10 or 15 years before, with risks of Indian attacks and brigands, and it's civilized. It's been really things move fast in the late 19th century, and it's been civilized. Let me tell you how civilized it's become. He's going to move in. His ranch is about 20 miles outside of Jamestown, North Dakota. He spent $14,000 on the property, which is about $450,000, and he's buying a bunch of cows, and he's going to run them. But here's an article from the Grand Forks Herald, just summarizing what's going on on this one day, September 26, 1887. It says here, 100 teachers attended the Teachers Institute at Huron. It's got a teachers college. The Pierre University opened last week with good attendance. It is said that Aberdeen, and this is a tiny town, Aberdeen is soon to have a new passenger depot and I'll do the conversion, a $4 million hotel in Aberdeen. 10 students from North Dakota have been admitted to the Sioux Falls Deaf Mute Institute. There's a deaf mute school there. It says here, Huron is now happily in possession of a free postal delivery system. Fargo is said will come in the next order. So the mails are being delivered on a regular basis. And it says here a Teachers Institute will be held in Jamestown. Remember, this is only 20 miles from his ranch, beginning Monday, September 26th and continuing for 4 days. Territorial Superintendent Dye and a bunch of other swells will be in attendance. So he's moving into an area, while it is great for ranching, has largely been civilized. He's not on the edge of the known world here. It's kind of like it wouldn't be much different from being in Iowa or even Illinois, except for the mountains off in the background and the bisons rolling around. But other than that, now Now, wherever Theodore Roosevelt goes, he manages to find the press. He's never met a reporter he wouldn't talk to. So here we have an article from the Bismarck Tribune, July 18th, 1885. It says here, Mr. Theodore Roosevelt is spoken of by a correspondent of the Philadelphia Record as a politician from circumstance and a ranchman from choice. He has, continues the correspondent, besides his ranch property, a glorious tract of land on Long Island Sound at the far east end of the island. And this is Sagamore Hill. So, look, he's got enough money. He's got ranches going out here. He owns the property here, and he's going to build a house. What kind of house? Well, it says here he's just built himself a house at an expense of $45,000. That's about $1.4 million. This is an immense establishment for a widower with only one child, but Mr. Roosevelt will probably keep his house filled with guests. And that house, Sagamore Hill, is now a National Historic Site, and you can go visit it. But this is a man who's not worried about where his next meal is coming from. The Bismarck Tribune, on August 26, 1885, about a month later, notes Theodore Roosevelt en route. Theodore Roosevelt, the young reformer, and he's known as that, he's not the young politician, he's the young reformer of New York, passed through this city yesterday en route to his ranch in the Badlands. He was as bright and talkative as ever and spoke of the great opportunities of the imperial Northwest with more enthusiasm than has ever been exhibited by the most sanguine old-timer. He's fatally optimistic about almost everything in life. And just as he was back east, he loves telling people what to do. So here we go. The Bismarck Tribune, August 29th, 1885. Theodore Roosevelt is president of the Missouri Cattle Association, and he's issued a call for a meeting September 5th. Loves meetings. The Missouri Cattle Association doesn't refer to the state of Missouri. There's an area called the Missouri Buttes in that area, and that's what this is what about. But he likes to organize things, and he likes to tell you what to do. In the winter, when he goes back home, he likes to lecture, because then he's telling you what to do. And here's an article from the Bismarck Tribune in December 1, 1885. Theodore Roosevelt lectured last week in New York on hunting the game of the far west. Mr. Roosevelt says that the western frontiersmen and hunters are a healthy and robust lot of men, but the worst thing they have to contend with is the familiarity of skunks. Yet, Mr. Roosevelt said, this is not so bad as politics in the state of New York. Funny man. He's even a friend of women, suffragettes. Says here, in the Bismarck Tribune, August 3rd, 1887, Queens of the Ranch, Theodore Roosevelt tells of the women of the plains. A rough and sometimes desperate life for the fair sex, but how pluck and courage leads to success. He's an ardent supporter of women's rights. Likes to write books. Remember we said that? While he's out there, he writes a book on hunting trips of a ranchman, isn't it? It's a 350-page book about his exploits in hunting. And he goes on and describes about the hunting of the grouse. He goes from small animals to the larger. So he starts off with how to hunt a grouse, wild turkeys, white and black-tailed deer. Next he goes on to mountain sheep, then the lordly buffalo, then how to stage an elk hunt, and finally his experience in pursuing and killing grizzly bears. And it's noted in the review that the most interesting of the chapters is Mr. Roosevelt's narrative of his experience in killing grizzly bears. He says that the danger in hunting the beast has been greatly exaggerated, and he goes on to say that it was pretty dangerous, 50 years ago when you had to hunt them with a one-shot musket, and if you missed, a 1,200-pound bear was going to come and crush you. A couple things drive Teddy back east in 1887. For one, the winter of 1886 through 1887 was terrible. It was super cold, and he loses half his herd to the chill. But he also runs into an old longtime friend, woman longtime friend, and gets remarried. Here's the article from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, December 2nd, 1886. Theodore Roosevelt's marriage. Theodore Roosevelt was married this morning to Edith Kermit Carew of New York at St. George's Church. And where were they going to go on their honeymoon? Niagara Falls? Hardly. Mr. and Mrs. Roosevelt will leave this afternoon for Italy. Going to Italy, you can't go to Italy. That's got to be a 2 or 3 month adventure there. It's going to take you 2 weeks just to get to Italy on the boat, and it's going to take you 2 weeks coming back. So, anyways, he's got time because he doesn't have to earn a living. But when he gets back, he's got to do something again. He wants to get involved in politics because, remember, he wants to be a member of the ruling class. Some friends of his convince him to run for mayor. Now, he's running up against the Tammany machine. He doesn't have much of a chance, but they think he does. And newspapers were incredibly partisan back then. If you think newspapers are partisan now, you've never seen a newspaper. So even though he has very little chance of winning, here's what the New York Tribune has to say on October 28, 1886. Mr. Roosevelt's prospects, his election now deemed certain. It says here, Chairman Davenport and Plummer and other Republicans made a careful estimate yesterday from a canvass of the city of probable votes for Mr. Roosevelt. So they're doing their own polling, and their own polling says that he should get between 85 and 90,000 votes, and that should ensure him a victory. Then, the New York Tribune on October 26, 1886 says Roosevelt bound to win. The enthusiasm over Mr. Roosevelt's candidacy in the dry goods district, it's strange, I guess there's the meat packing district and the dry goods district, which has been growing at an astonishing pace ever since his nomination, culminated in a rousing mass meeting yesterday afternoon. Well, it was a big mass meeting, but here's what happened. New York Tribune, November 3rd, 1886. Mr. Roosevelt, who had been dining with friends, entered the room about 8 o'clock. He had arrived at the conclusion that he was defeated early in the day and seems determined to show that he was not downhearted. So he got blown out. He actually came in third, wasn't even close. But he's throwing his hat in the ring. He's the man in the arena, as he would say, and he's out there pitching. He didn't get elected office, but he's gonna do the next best thing. He's been approached, and this is funny. He's been approached to go to accept a job in Washington. He's basically become kind of a pain in the rear to the Republicans in New York City, and they could use him down the road a couple hundred miles for a while. So he takes on a position in the Civil Service Commission. At that point in time in American politics, it was called the spoils system. Whoever won the election would then give jobs to all their crony friends. You might call it patronage, but it was even worse than that. And spoils is a more accurate representation of what it is. And Teddy will have none of it. He thinks that that government jobs should be open to all eligible people, and that there should be a civil service exam that you have to write and pass to show you're qualified to actually accept the job. And the Tammany Hall guys of the world will have none of it. And so he makes incredible enemies, but the public likes what he's doing. It's very similar. It's very similar to how Harry Truman became famous. Harry Truman, of course, in 1941 led the commission. When he was a senator, he led the commission that investigated waste and fraud in government, specifically in the military, and he got national exposure on that and became vice president and subsequently president. Well, he's doing the same thing. Roosevelt's doing the exact same thing. But what's he up against? Here's a great article from the Cleveland Plain Dealer of October 9th, 1890. The headline is "A Call for the Cash. Chairman Hahn makes a business trip to Washington." And this is in conjunction. There's two things. They give you the job through patronage or spoils, right? But once you got the job, it's expected that you will contribute heavily and mightily to either the Republican or Democrat cause, whoever's appointed you. So here's what we got. Mr. Roosevelt's Civil Service Commission machine was severely talked about tonight, and it was the members of the Ohio Republican Association that did the talking. It says here the meeting was not held at the rooms of the association. It was strictly a business affair. It had been called under the direction of William H. Hahn, the chairman of the Republican Committee of Ohio, who came all the way to Washington to inform the Buckeye office holders, and this is what's important, that they were all expected to come down handsomely in the way of contributions, and that he was ready to receive the stuff. Now you see why reform is necessary. The fix is in. The baskets are being passed. Everyone expects either a job or to have to fund. Nothing is on the upright. Nothing is on the square. Everything in politics is rigged at that point in time. Headline of the St. Joseph Daily Press, October 11th, 1894, "Foul Blackmail. Teddy Roosevelt's Civil Service Commission on the warpath." It says here, the Civil Service Commission will be busy with investigation of cases of assessment for political purposes for some time to come. Teddy makes the statement, "I want to say that no man in office, whether Democrat or Republican, is under any obligation to contribute to a campaign fund and cannot be molested in any way by his superior officers for refusing. This assessment business is mere foul blackmail, and we intend to make a war on it in every way possible." Which they did. And he gets favorable press. Now, the old-timers in the political parties can't stand him, but he's got his name out there as a reforming, progressive person looking out for the little guy. Now, Teddy makes a decision here while he's running that commission. He makes a decision that the best way to become president, and he's looking at being president someday, would be if he could work through and become governor of New York. And because most presidential candidates are governors, he wants to get back involved in local New York politics so that he can work his way through the governorship into a presidential race. So he takes a job. Well, he's offered a job. Here's what it says. Mr. Roosevelt's answers report from Washington that he will be the police commissioner. He's going to go back to New York City, and he's going to try to reform the police department. The police department's one of the most corrupt. Well, police departments in general are rather new, and It's hard to say whether they're more incompetent or corrupt. And Teddy wants to deal with both of those issues here. So he wants to become a crusading police commissioner, and according to the New York Times, Mr. Roosevelt will become Mayor Strong's right-hand man on the police commission. So he's going to go back and try to reform New York City the way he reformed Washington. And what kind of a police commissioner is he going to be? Well, here's how it's stated here in the New York Times. Strict honesty, attention to duty, and an observance of the rules and regulations of the department will govern the tenure of office of every man in it, high or low, as long as Roosevelt is police commissioner. You may rest assured of this fact: any employee of the police department who attempts any crookedness or who is derelict in duty to the extent of a hairbreadth will go sailing out, no matter what the influence he may command while Mr. Roosevelt is in office. Well, and that's the kind of police commissioner he was. So over a couple of years, he performs the police commission, but then his career goes sideways 90 degrees. He's offered a job. Now, he wants to become governor. This is a temporary delay, but he's offered a job that is just so darn good he has to accept it. It says here, it is Teddy. In the Messenger Inquirer of April 7th, 1897, Roosevelt named Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Now, what's so important about that? You got to realize that the Army at that point in time is inconsequential. The way that the United States projects power is the same as England. The way they're going to project power throughout the world is through their Navy. And amazingly enough, this is the exact same route that Churchill took and that Franklin Delano Roosevelt took. They were all at points in time, the Secretary of the Navy or the First Admiral of the Navy. And this is Teddy Roosevelt's foot in the door in the most important service, the Navy. And the Navy needs reform, and he goes about trying to reform it. It says here in the Lexington Herald, December 31, 1897, Roosevelt, Assistant Secretary of the Navy, proposes plan to better the service. And he's going to try to better the service. He brings in, he wants pay and benefits to be equal and pensions to be equal to what the Army is giving. He wants a merit system in promotions. He's got a whole series of items that are adopted by the Navy and actually do improve the Navy's efficiency. And it's almost as if he knew what was coming next, and maybe he did. Because throughout 1897, he's defending basically the Monroe Doctrine and saying that no European power should have anything to do with any politics in the Western Hemisphere. And at that point in time, Spain is in control of Cuba, and it doesn't sit well with Teddy Roosevelt. Now, I'm not accusing him of this, but it is the first big conspiracy. It is the first big national conspiracy in American history, and here we are on the Bangor commercial, Wednesday, February 16th, 1898. USS Maine blown up. The battleship Maine, terrible catastrophe in the harbor of Havana. The estimate of loss, 253 reported to have been killed. The battleship Maine blows up in Havana Harbor. Aside here, it's not really a battleship, it's an armored cruiser, but it was a slow armored cruiser, so they took on a designation of a second-class battleship. But it was an armored cruiser. More importantly, it blew up, killing 253 people. And that gets everybody angry. The Navy, though, large part because of Roosevelt's reform, is in a position to act quickly. And we'll get to what they do in just a second, because according to the New York Tribune, it says, ready to move on Cuba, and this is May 1, 1898, ready to move on Cuba, an invasion this week. It says here, volunteers not to be subjected to the horrors of a summer campaign. They're more afraid of the tropical weather than they are of the Spanish troops. And they note that in the year before, in the 1 year before, this is what happened to Spain's troops as they were fighting rebels in Cuba. It says, of this total, between 5,000 and 6,000 soldiers succumbed to yellow fever. More than 6,000 died from dysentery, and 7,000 from malaria and other fevers, and 2,500 from smallpox. So the volunteers were given assurance that they wouldn't be shipped out in the summer to fight in Cuba. Well, that all went by the windows because they were anyways. Teddy gets involved with a movement that is initially labeled the Rustler Regiments. Rapid progress in recruiting reported from the West. Teddy's terror is expected to be ready for service within 10 days. It says here, reports were received at the War Department today from various points of the West showing the rapidity with which the 3 Rocky Mountain regiments of riflemen are being recruited, and the indications are that at least one of them will be commanded by Dr. Leonard Wood and Theodore Roosevelt as lieutenant colonel. They will rendezvous in San Antonio within the next 10 days. So he's organizing what will then become the Rough Riders, at that point in time, the Rustler Regiments. And he's resigned his position with the Navy, and he's off to do battle as a real colonel. One thing about Teddy Roosevelt is he's brave. He's incredible. He has incredible personal bravery, and we're going to see that over the next couple of articles here. But before we get to his exploits in Cuba, the Navy that he remodeled is in a battle out there in the Philippines. And here we have here of the New York Tribune, May 2nd, 1898, great victory at Manila. Nearly all the ships of the Spanish squadron either burned or sunk. No mention of any American vessel being lost. The American Navy kicked the bejabbers out of the Spanish Navy at the Battle of Manila Bay and gained control of the Philippines. That began gaining control of the Philippines, and the United States would go on to colonize the Philippines over the next couple of decades. Teddy, though, was leading cavalry and infantry regiments on the island of Cuba, and we've got two eyewitness accounts here. The first is by Lieutenant Joseph Carr, and the second is by Sergeant Cash. Here's the first. We were not supported by artillery, and it was a test of what American nerve and determination could do. At the engagement with the ambush, most of my troops were shot down, and I was left in command of what remained of the troops. Many all around me fell in the second engagement on San Juan Hill. So there's several. He's fighting at Siboney, then he's fighting at San Juan Hill, Kettle Hill. He's involved in several battles here. Here, though, they continue. After holding position under an incessant fire, we had later to defend ourselves against an assault by the Spanish in an attempt on their part to recapture the position. It was estimated there were 4,000 Spaniards engaged in the sortie to recapture Roosevelt's position in the San Juan Hill. The fire was terrific, and our men went right into the teeth of it. And after a while, the Spaniards seemed to be bewildered and taken entirely out of their calculations by the fact that our men advanced to the fire instead of retiring. So they're brave to a fault. Now, Sergeant Cash has what they refer to as a Rough Rider story. It says that the fighting was hard and narrow, and the rough mountain trails made it difficult to move in any military form. The Spanish are desperate fighters and very good marksmen. Their fire was extremely hot and well directed, and our great trouble was that we could not see them. We simply had to fire where we thought they might be. During the two engagements I was in, I saw but two Spaniards. At the first engagement near Siboney, where the Rough Riders were first subjected to such galling fire and where we lost a lot of our men, we were not surprised. We knew that the Spaniards were in ambush, and we were trying to beat them out. We knew that at any minute they were likely to open fire on us. There was very hot work for a while, but this was nothing like the second engagement in which San Juan Hill was taken. It's fun how they always describe, if in Civil War articles, or now here in the Spanish-American War, that the action is either warm or hot. That's how they refer to it here. It says the San Juan Hill engagement was practically an all-day fight up a heavy slope in the face of terrific and very accurate fire. We were in the short cane where the Spaniards could easily locate us and keep track of our movements. The bullets from the Spanish rifles cut the cane around us and picked off our men incessantly. It was, in fact, hot action here. But what was Roosevelt doing? Well, it says here, speaking of Colonel Roosevelt, Sergeant Cash said that he kept to the front, shooting his revolver and cheering his men on. He could not see the Spaniards, but kept his revolver popping at points where he believed them to be, and conducted himself with coolness and bravery. In all aspects, an exemplary commander. No complaints by anybody about the way Roosevelt handled himself in the Spanish-American War. And as a matter of fact, after the war, he was presented with a gift. And we have a New York Tribune article outlining what happened. It says, a gift to Colonel Roosevelt, remembered by his men before they leave Montauk. It says here, the Bronco Buster in bronze presented. Could it possibly be the Bronco Buster? Well, it was. It says here, in the middle of the day, before any of the troopers got away, because no one wanted to miss it, there came the presentation of the regimental gift to Colonel Roosevelt. It says they gathered in a loose circle. They formed, and within which stood a table having on it the statue by Frederick Remington, a Bronco Buster. Now that Bronco Buster statue, I don't know what it set him back then, but if you were trying to buy one in mint condition and one of the original 25 that were cast, and this is one of them, you're going to spend the better part of $500,000. And if you want Teddy Roosevelt's, I would conjecture that you're going to spend $1 million on that nice little gift that his men gave him. But again, he's progressive. There's a progressive incident here at the presentation. It says, about them stood some of the 200 colored troopers of the 9th and 10th Cavalry, who worshipped the Rough Riders in the same fashion as the Rough Riders worshipped them, and gathered where they could, To see and hear the best was a crowd of officers, sergeants, nurses, and visitors. So the black troops of the 10th Cavalry showed their support for Roosevelt at the presentation. So now he set himself up. He's a popular hero. Everybody in America knows who Teddy Roosevelt is. He's the man who charged up San Juan Hill. And he parlays that into a run for governor in New York State. And does he win this time? Well, of course he does. It says here in the New York Tribune, November 9th, 1898, Roosevelt gets the news. It says the next governor would not talk of his plan, but he was informed last night of his victory by a telegram from Chairman Odell of the Republican State Committee saying he had been elected governor by between 30 and 40,000 votes. He got the news out at his house in Cove Neck, Oyster Bay, surrounded by his family and friends out at Sagamore Hill. Now, Teddy can't help himself. He's a reformer. He's going to reform no matter what level of government he's at here. It says here, the New York Tribune, February 7th, 1899, the bill well starched. The Roosevelt Civil Service Act introduced. Its provisions more stringent than the old law. So he's even going to one-up the Federal Civil Service Act. He's going to make it fair. He's going to make the tests hard. He's not going to take any guff from the Tammany Hall crowd. But even though he's just been elected governor, there's already machinations. There's already thinking in his mind, the next step, the presidency. And he reminds me of, this whole thing as we now transition into his run for the presidency, it reminds me of J. Pierpont Finch. J. Pierpont Finch is, of course, the hero in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. He goes from a window washer to the chairman of the board of the Worldwide Wicket Corporation in about 2 weeks. And then even as he's getting used to the chair in the chairman of the board's office, he's thinking and dreaming he wants to be president. And that's the mindset of Teddy Roosevelt. Not only does he want to be a member of the ruling class, he wants to be the ruler. Here we have an article in the New York Tribune, April 7th, 1900. Roosevelt or Woodruff? Odell makes statement for Woodruff, but Roosevelt also pressed for the vice presidency. It says there was considerable talk on the Fifth Avenue Hotel last night of the effect that Governor Roosevelt's possibility that he possibly might be nominated for vice president. So there's already talk. As he's just getting used to the chair as governor that he's the right man for vice president. He's got some more reforming to do. There's reform problems in the reformatories. This is a kind of a tragic thing that he gets involved with here. And about 70 years before the Geraldo Rivera exposés on mental hospitals in New York State, but what they're saying here is that they need to return to corporal punishment. And there's no other way here. It says Mr. Brockwell's argument in favor of paddling, it is said, is that he has no way of controlling vicious inmates at the reformatory except by solitary confinement in cells, and that such solitary confinement increases the number of inmates who become insane. We're still fighting these battles now. How do you treat violently mentally ill people? Do you treat them as prisoners? Do you treat them as patients? Do you not treat them at all? Who knows? But that was a problem that Teddy was trying to solve in 1899. He never stops campaigning, though. Even when he's elected and he's in office, he's still campaigning for something. New York Tribune, August 20th, 1899, crowds at Chautauqua. 10,000 people hear Governor Roosevelt speak. Bishop Vincent predicts that someday he will be president. It says it should be stated that Bishop Vincent, more cautious than Messrs. Sutherland and O'Grady, did not require that Governor Roosevelt's nomination should take place in 1900. It might become an historical event in some more distant day. But he's making he's making speeches on general points of policy. But people are pointing out that this is going to be our next president, or maybe the president after that. Speculation all over the country. New York Times article, February 24th, 1900. It says here, Wisconsin favors Theodore Roosevelt for the vice presidency. We believe that Roosevelt as vice president has a better chance for the presidency than as governor of New York. We believe, too, that if the convention, by anything like a unanimous vote, demands the nomination of Governor Roosevelt, he will accept. So you can't look like you want the job too much. But Roosevelt's made it clear that he doesn't really want to be vice president. But if the country needs him and it's unanimous or near unanimous that he be the vice president, he will serve. Not like that rascally General Sherman who said that if nominated he would not run, and if elected he would not serve. Don't worry, Teddy Roosevelt will both be nominated and elected if he has the chance. So he's out on the trail. He's out on the campaign trail, and is he going to duck the campaign from his basement? Not a chance. Roosevelt tour ended, traveled 21,209 miles, and addressed 3 million people. It says here, in 8 weeks, he has visited 24 states of the Union, made 673 speeches, traveled 21,200 miles, visited 567 towns and cities, and talked to what is estimated at 3 million people. Wow. It says the wonderful campaign was finished by a 2-week tour of state of New York. He did 2,253 miles, gave through 37 counties, gave 120 speeches, most of them in the back of his railway car. Well, he gave it all for the McKinley ticket, and they won. So he's vice president here in November of 1900. Now we have here we have Governor Roosevelt's remarks after the election. It says Governor and Vice President-elect Roosevelt followed President McKinley. He said, "There's no doubt about our position. There's no doubt about it. We are going to carry on the policy that has been pursued during the past 4 years." He talks about making the currency sound, sticking with the gold standard, and he concludes, "I feel that we are to be congratulated not merely as Republicans, but as Americans, because we approach the 20th century in the knowledge that this people have, with seriousness of purpose, set their faces to a proper solution of all the many problems which a great nation has to meet." And he's going to be leading. Right now, he's second in command, but before too long, and in the very near future, he's going to be running the show, because September 13th, 1901, El Dorado Republican, El Dorado, Kansas, victim of an assassin, President McKinley shot twice while in the Buffalo Exposition Grounds. The murderer is under arrest. While holding a reception in the Temple of Music, the president was shot down by a well-dressed stranger who was shaking hands with him. It's a rascal, but Roosevelt's the man now. Roosevelt's going to step into the presidency, and that's the next story. We got him to the front door of the White House, and that's where our story ends for today. So let's pause with the pause that refreshes. Our themed cocktail, and this is the Roosevelt cocktail. It's an actual cocktail named after Teddy Roosevelt, and you'll see why, because it starts off with 1 3/4 ounces of dark Cuban rum, of course, half an ounce of dry vermouth, 1/4 ounce of freshly squeezed orange juice, and a quarter teaspoon of sugar. Shake over ice 20 seconds or so, get the proper dilution and temperature. Now, strain it into a chilled coupe glass. Coupe glasses, again, are our favorite champagne glasses from the 1930s with the wide rim. And then garnish with an orange twist, and you're ready with a tremendous cocktail. Take a sip and relax, because riding along with Teddy Roosevelt is exhausting. Now, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps out our channel. And we're going to be back next week with another episode of the 100 Years and More Show. Take care, everybody.